Fluid intelligence peaks in boys and men between 18 to 25. So, this is the ability to think fast about highly novel abstract ideas through pattern formation. Some of the greatest discoveries of humanity have occurred in the late teens and early 20s, discovered by young men. Could you imagine if we supported boys and men so that they were at their most confident and thriving in those late teens and early 20s, and they were just so tuned in to how amazing their brains are and how strategic they are and how they have this fluid intelligence and how their pattern formations are so cool and how their depth perception is so interesting and it's all so unique to men and boys. Imagine what the world would be like if that's what we experienced. Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ancient Intelligence. You've got your host, Anya Shak here, and today I want to get into a fun evolutionary psychology nerding out episode where I get into the psychology of boys and men. And one of the most foundational elements about male psychology that I think most people don't really get on a fundamental level, but it's this thing right here that I think governs so much of the drives and the motivations that boys and men have. And I just love this stuff. I think it's so important because if we could actually understand this and then not only get it, but then utilize this knowledge to then help boys and men thrive, it'd be a game changer. So let's just get straight into it. So I've been reading very slowly the book by Joyce Benenson, Worriers I. And she gets into sex differences in such detailed ways. And there's this one chapter called Boys and the Enemy that I thought was just super fascinating. And I'm slowly moving through this book. So I'm going to do another episode on girls and what the most foundational aspect of female psychology is. But today, let's get into it. Boys and why this notion of the enemy matters so much. I just want to just dive straight in. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some studies that I found with that are really interesting and just kind of help us understand better, connecting it to culture a little bit. I have a great example there. I want to get into a conversation about fluid intelligence and what that means and how boys actually thrive if we really understand how their fluid intelligence really works. Men in communication and just the difference between that with women. And then a little bit about competition and how competition integrates into friendship for men, but it definitely does not for women. So I just think it's super interesting. So, okay. Number one thing, we have developed different fears as men and women, right? Like evolutionarily, we have developed a specific fear that helps us solve a problem. And the problem that we're solving is, of course, to stay alive and to stay connected to the group. So men have one fear and women have another fear. And so because we are blind to the fear of the other because it's just not ever present in our psychology, sometimes the things that the opposite sex is focusing on and thinking about and worried about seem silly to us, right? And so that happens all the time. When it comes to boys and men, this is, again, what Joyce Benenson was talking about in her book, Worriers and Worriers. So what is it that boys and men fear? An enemy, the enemy. Like, this is the most important thing, the notion that there is an enemy out there and we must fight the enemy to survive, to stay alive, and to keep everyone safe and protected. So it's really interesting because if we think about the enemy, it kind of is alive in so much of the way that boys and men, and specifically men, have kind of worked to make society better and worked to help us achieve more and help us get to a place of more and more safety. That's effectively what's happened. We have gone from survival to extreme safety, almost to the point of ultra comfort, to the point where we almost forget that an enemy exists. And so there's some really great examples about, the way that men talk about different issues that we need to face and win over. The battle against cancer, right? We're fighting a war on drugs. We have to tackle illiteracy. Effectively, we have to win against X. And so it's this greater male purpose, this greater male drive to beat the enemy. And so I just think that's a super fascinating idea, this idea that men are always fighting something, and that's the way we survive. And so if we think about that, it just makes so much sense what men care about, what men are thinking about, what men are focused on, and also how they behave day to day and within conversation and just the different behaviors that they have that are just so different from female behaviors. So one of the things that's the most important thing and how this all begins, boys enjoy rough and tumble play so much to the point where they find such great pleasure in this. Mock hunting, mock capture, escape, fighting. What's interesting is it's so pleasurable for boys, and I just love learning about this stuff because it illuminates so much of what happens later in adult life. So it's so pleasurable to boys that when they're not doing it, they're not fighting, play fighting, they're dreaming up different scenarios to be play fighting. So it's just really crazy. There was this great study done in Boston, Benenson was talking about. So they took 6 to 9 month old infants, pre-verbal, no idea what boys and girls are, obviously. They had them sit on their parents' lap and watch two sets of videos. And they could choose which video they were watching. One video was an adult hugging a balloon. The other video was an adult hitting a balloon. And then after watching the videos, they were given a balloon and they could choose what they wanted to do with it. So both boys and girls had the opportunity to choose whatever they wanted. The girls chose to watch the video of the adult hugging the balloon, and the boys chose to watch the video of the adult hitting the balloon. And then obviously once they got the balloon, the boys instantaneously went to hitting the balloon, and it made them laugh and giggle, and just there was so much pleasure in it, right? And so it's just stuff like this just debunks any sort of idea that sex differences are socialized. It's just ridiculous. It is so biological. And so the other really interesting thing about boys is by age 3, they can throw so much further and more precise than girls. There's literally no other activity that boys excel at, like in comparison to girls at 3, than this throwing and being precise with the throwing. So that's really interesting that they're just like driven towards that. Another thing that boys are already developing in a way that girls are not developing is depth perception and the ability to take objects that are far away and like move them and model them in different positions in their brains. So that's really interesting. If you think about it, that's really something that's required in battle. It's something that's required in sports. It's just so interesting. I nerd out over this stuff because it just makes a lot of sense, because then you get to understand all the different behaviors that men are exhibiting, like in order to express this, in order to like drive towards this, in order to ultimately fight the enemy. Here's another really great study. So that was a study about fighting, okay? And this is a study about empathy that I think is really, really key and can help us understand a very important culture, like a very important difference between boys and girls that then contributes to what's happening in our culture today and why things are so chaotic politically. So there was a study done where men and women were hooked up to brain scanners as they watched people play a game, okay? They got to see whether the people playing the game were playing fairly or whether they were cheating at the game, okay? And the people playing were connected to electric shock machines. So electric shocks would go into these people as they were playing, and they would measure the brains of the men and women watching, okay? So every time a player that was playing fairly got an electric shock, both men and women's empathy centers lit up. Okay, whenever an electric shock would go into the hands of a cheating person, the person that was cheating, women's empathy centers lit up just the same as with the fair playing person, but men's empathy centers did not light up at all. Actually, their pleasure center lit up. Super key psychological distinction between men and women. Men are deeply connected and are in relationship with the fact that cheating, unfairness, all of that causes danger. All of that is the enemy, right? That is our enemy. We need to fight against that. Women are not really, clearly are not tuned into that. Now, I'm excited to read the next chapter of this book because I hope to understand even more deeply what that is. I think that probably women just aren't so connected to the mortality of what it means to have an enemy nearby, or to have an enemy out there that you have to protect yourself from. There's some other study that I think I was reading about how little girls, if they're adult, there's something about how if little girls are around, or little if adults are around, little girls feel safe. But if for little boys, they don't, though. If adults have weapons, if they know that adults have weapons, this is like 6 to 7 year olds, right? So they already know what a weapon is, then they feel safe. But otherwise, the little boys don't just feel safe just because adults are around. So they're just more connected to this idea of the enemy. It's so interesting. So this empathy difference, okay, can easily connect to this cultural distinction or this cultural thing that's going on right now, especially in the United States. Just this, I think it's happening in other parts of Europe too, but the left decriminalizing petty theft, right? It's insane. I think I heard Amy Wax talking about this professor, an interview that I heard from her. It's the most anti-masculine thing, right? It's the most anti-law and order thing, this idea of decriminalizing theft. This person is a liar and a cheater and a danger to society, right? But because for some reason we have placed the people that commit petty theft or even worse into some sort of like vulnerable category of human, women empathy centers light up for this. And because of the feminization of culture and politics and everything, that's why we have this. That's why we've gotten to a place where in the West, the most wonderful, civilized place that has existed thus far, we have decriminalized something that goes so against the very values of our society, right? It makes sense because you can connect it to this biological difference. So just taking a second here, like the entire purpose men have is to protect from the enemy, to do good. Little boys are like dreaming up ways to kill the dragon and to save people from the enemy. And as they grow older and older, the enemy becomes more and more real. The other really important distinction is that because the enemy isn't always around, right? I think men are just not always worried, like acutely worried. I bet in a greater sense, they're always like, with the big picture view of things, making sure that everything's good, but they can relax once they've secured their container, once they've secured their family, right? They feel comfortable that, okay, everyone's safe. They can take a rest. I think women don't have that in their psychology. So women are much more anxious of being abandoned and being hurt and just being left alone and being without their social group, right? I think that's the fear that women have. So there's just this more acute worry that women have that I don't think men have. And that's why it's just so amazing when you have like a decisive, aggressive, strong man that is confident, right? He can so easily soothe a woman. Easily, just so easily soothe a woman with not really even with words, just with his presence and with a hug, with just that groundedness. And it's so biological too. It's just like reminds me of the joke, like every boss babe, independent woman is like, can do it all herself until there's a crisis, until there's a fire, until there's like, she needs to be rescued. Then she's suddenly just like melts into, please save me. It's so biological. And it's crazy. Yeah, I wrote this in some of my notes. Like, yeah, it's pretty confusing. Why would women's brains continue to light up with these bad people? But I guess it's because of that vulnerability, that categorization that we've made, just ideologically, the categorizations that we've made in our culture and the mainstream around, like, these people are bad and these people are vulnerable. And so no matter how bad the vulnerable people do, we still have empathy for them, which is so, so dangerous. It's so, so dangerous. It doesn't make any sense at all. And it goes hand in hand with like the Free Palestine people too, that are just, they have some sort of click in their minds around feeling empathy for terrorists. It's the most anti-law and order, anti-masculine, anti-safety, like, and security, like mental illness, to be honest with you. It's insane. It doesn't make any sense to me. So something else that's really interesting about boys. Okay, I'm moving into this concept called fluid intelligence, okay? Fluid intelligence peaks in boys and men between 18 to 25. So this is the ability to think fast about highly novel abstract ideas through pattern formation. Some of the greatest discoveries of humanity have occurred in the late teens and early 20s, discovered by young men, right? These creative ideas, because this is when they're experiencing this fluid intelligence. It's when this boy mom that I know at a job I worked last year, she was like, God, my son will not brush his teeth and he will not remember to do his homework. But I can tell you, he knows the batting average of two of his favorite baseball teams for the last 20 years before he was even alive. He knows all the stats, And it's this idea of pattern formation that I think is so fascinating that boys really understand, because I think this helps boys strategize. And I think boys are incredible strategizers, and they're amazing at this. And so women excel in other things. We excel in verbal ability. We excel in memory for faces and places, keeping people connected and feeling close. I think this is important in our culture as well. And I can't wait to talk about that. We'll have a whole girls episode, which will be so fun, but this is a boys episode. So the other thing that I think is really amazing is, you know, with this fluid intelligence, with this ability to strategize, with this drive and pleasure in fighting and capturing and escaping and doing good and strategizing and creating systems and coming up with brand new ideas to help make society function even better. I think boys, this is where the single focus is really key. And just boys and men being so singular focused in when they're thinking about something or working on something. And I can tell you right now, like I've been on dates and I can I can feel when a man is moving from, okay, we're having a connection, we're talking about family or travel or things that have happened in our lives, and then suddenly he's excited about some sort of strategic idea, right? He's thinking about his work and he's talking about what he's creating. His connection is severed from me in that moment, and he's all into this strategy. And I can actually feel that happen. And it's just so interesting, because I think oftentimes women will take those things personally. Oh, he's not connected to me anymore. And I can think that can happen once people get into relationships and they get married and they don't understand these nuances of our behavior and why we do what we do. And so oftentimes, a man will get really excited and really into his strategy or what he's creating, and he won't notice how he's disconnected. And I think it's a woman's job to say, hey, I need more connection, right? I need a little more presence from you. Not while you're talking about your amazing stuff that you're talking about, but just I'm missing that if that's missing. So yeah, and it's not, what's great is it's not personal. It's not personal. It's just understanding the male psychology and what it's doing and why it's doing what it's doing, because it's all in this grand effort to protect himself and those he loves and his community from the enemy. And that's why it's so important. It's the same reason why, a man and a woman will be waiting to cross the street, and then there'll be cars coming, and a woman will just kind of like try to go as fast as she can and just find a little opening and just like race over there because she's just trying to get over there. And then he will just not do that. I find that men are just more patient. They're just like, okay, there's no reason to, uh, you know, there could be like a drunk driver. There could be someone that messes something up. This person could not stop. Like, I'm not going to put myself at risk. So I'm going to be patient and I'm going to wait until all the cars go by, and then I'm going to calmly walk across the street. It's just more it's just something that I've experienced with men. So I think it's just really interesting. And of course they will say, hey, don't walk. Like, wait, like it's not worth it for you to walk right now. So I think that's interesting. Could you imagine if we supported boys and men so that they were at their most confident and thriving in those late teens and early 20s, and they were just so tuned in to how amazing their brains are and how strategic they are and how they have this fluid intelligence and how their pattern formations are so cool and how their depth perception is so interesting, and it's all so unique to men and boys. And just imagine, like, if we could say, you can create anything. Like, you are so capable. You have so many innate gifts. You just have to obviously work on them and build yourself up. And I just think, man, imagine what the world would be like if that's what we experience. So with that, I think, yeah, this is something that Joyce Benenson was mentioned in her book, and I was writing more notes about it. Like, educators could really use males' innate proclivity towards fighting enemies in education, in school, right? We have this crisis in boys falling behind in school and girls succeeding in school because girls are just so much better at following the rules. But they have so many innate gifts and they can create and innovate in such beautiful ways. Like, imagine if we played to boys' strengths in school and in education, it would be just a game changer. And I imagine, like, back in the day when the first ever universities were opening up and boys prep schools and stuff, and it was mostly male educators, I imagine they did play to boys' strengths during those times. So I just think that's something we need to get back to. Okay, I'm going to finish up with some of this stuff on communication, and then I think this will be a great, like, episode about just boys' strengths and why it's important for us to also appreciate that boys are always thinking about the enemy. Men are always thinking about the enemy and defeating the enemy. And this is, like, again, our lives are so ultra comfortable in the West, thanks to boys and men having done this for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years. And now the culture wants to, like, ignore that or forget that. I mean, the more we do that, the more and more the enemy will get bigger and bigger. And then the more we'll have to go back to what it was like before. So it's really interesting. When boys communicate, there's a lot of great content in Joyce's book about, and she has great examples where she'll actually, like, do dialogue of boys and girls speaking to each other at age 4, at age 6. And so boys basically, when they speak to each other, thinking about, like, age 5 even, they'll issue directives, they'll command others, they'll ignore what someone just said, they'll disagree with another's point of view, they'll use direct statements, go there, like, I want this, all of that. Girls don't do this, as you can imagine. Girls do not do this. This is so a no-no for girls. And she was giving a great tennis example. So when, like, in a men's game, obviously the winner of a shot or point will brag and insult the opponent, but also we'll make note when shots are really good, right? We'll make note of that. If a woman hits a winning shot, she apologizes instantly. She attributes her winning shot to any number of external factors, like, oh, it was just the wind, or maybe I'm just having a good day today. And then the other one will be like, no, you're just amazing. And she'll say, I'm so sorry, I'm not my best today. And it's just, neither wants to be perceived as better than the other. So they both agree that they both suck. And it's just such a fascinating difference between between men and women, because men don't do this. Men don't do this at all. And it's just so interesting. I think, like, the relative ease with which boys and men integrate competition into their friendship makes a lot of sense, because ultimately it ladders up to that strategy is the best strategy we have to kill the enemy, to defeat the enemy. And there's a evolutionary psychology term called valuable relationship hypothesis, in that for men, conflicts must be resolved. Like, there's no choice otherwise. Both individuals will suffer, and conflicts are inevitable when two individuals spend time together. So if me and my sworn enemy realize we have a mutual enemy, we're going to come together and we are going to resolve our conflict so that we can defeat that larger enemy. That is, like, foundational male psychology. And that's not how female psychology works. And I think there's just so much richness to understand. And I even think I'm excited to unpack even more and more of that. But what I wanted to say before with the communication stuff is, like, you know, this happens to me when I'm in conversation with men, and I'll hear him, like, I'll say something, and sometimes a man will just ignore what I said and just move on to the next thing, because he's speaking via, like, his male psychology, and he's trying to get the point across, and he's trying to really deliver an argument or a point of view and communicate effectively and efficiently, like, what he's believing. And obviously the communication intention for him is to communicate the idea effectively, right? Whereas the communication intention for a woman is not to communicate ideas effectively, it's to create and maintain connection. And so a woman would never ignore, like, a point, right? She would, I hear you. Tell me more about that. And then it would just be completely different. And so because the intention for communication is completely different. And so I think we have to be really thoughtful about how and when we communicate, in which ways we communicate. Because if we can do that, then it's just so amazing. And that's why it's so great for men and women to have same sex groups and friendships. I think it's incredible for men to be able to have all that competitive banter and interrupting each other and all that stuff. And then, to be able to really understand like the intention for communication here in this moment with my woman is to maintain our connection and build and grow and maintain connection. And so there's a different way to communicate when you communicate in that for that intention. So it's really great. I'm excited to get into the girls chapter. I imagine it's the next one or in two chapters and keep going with this stuff. I think it's just so fun. I think this kind of information can really, hopefully, for people that care, for people that love boys and men and girls and women, for people that just like want union between the sexes and want harmony. This is just such magical information to support, uplift, and love boys and men and male psychology and all of the wonderful ways that it makes our world a safe place to be. And that's it. So hope y'all have enjoyed this one, and until the next one. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks so much for being here and for your support in this mission that I have to bring men and women closer together with the information that we all need to find more harmony with each other. If you found value, please help me grow the pod, and you can do one of two things. You can either share this episode with a friend, which I would love, or you can write me a review on Apple or Spotify, or you can do both. And finally, if you are looking for transformational coaching, you can book a one-on-one call with me, and it will be my pleasure to support you in this next season of your life. Till the next one, you guys.